Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. In the last days of summer, when the Red Keep glowed like a forge above the restless waters of Blackwater Bay, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen stood alone upon the walls of Maegor's holdfast. The wind teased at his silver hair, and the banners of the Dragon Prince rippled faintly in the dying light. Below him, the city murmured, a sea of whispers, prayers, and hidden fears. But Rhaegar's thoughts were not on the people of King's Landing, nor on the crown that one day would rest upon his brow. He was thinking of a song. They said he had been born in the midst of tragedy, when Summerhall burned, when the last of the old pyromancer's follies had turned to ash. They said he had come into the world amid screams and smoke and prophecy. All his life, Rhaegar had wondered what that meant, whether the fire that had taken so many would one day consume him as well. That evening, he descended from the walls and made his way through the winding corridors of the Red Keep. The torches flickered low, and the air smelled of old stone and secrets. He carried no guards, no heralds, only a single lantern in his hand. He was searching for something long forgotten. For weeks, he had studied the oldest records of the Targaryen line, books so ancient their pages had turned to dust at his touch. Within them, he had found mention of a vault sealed beneath Maegor's keep, a place said to hold the last relics of the Dragon Lord's darkest craft. Few believed it existed, fewer still dared to look for it. But Rhaegar's curiosity was not easily quelled. A half-forgotten map had guided him to a narrow stair spiraling down behind the throne room. The steps were slick with age, and the air grew colder as he descended. His lantern's flame wavered, throwing monstrous shadows across the stone. At the foot of the stair lay a massive iron door, its surface engraved with twisting forms, dragons, serpents, and what looked almost like human faces, their mouths open in eternal screams. Rhaegar pressed his hand to the door. Beneath his palm, he could feel a faint warmth, as though something within still lived. He hesitated, remembering the stories his mother had told him as a child, of Maegor the Cruel, who built the Red Keep with blood and sealed away his enemies within its walls. But curiosity, that dragon spark in his blood, drove him onward. He turned the ancient wheel. With a groan, like the dying breath of a giant, the door yielded. Beyond lay a long chamber filled with dust and shadow. Stone coffers lined the walls, and upon the floor were sigils of Valyria, spirals of fire and circles of blood. Rhaegar stepped forward, his boots stirring centuries of silence. At the far end of the chamber stood an altar of blackened steel. Upon it rested an open book, its pages inked in red. Beside it lay a cracked dragon's egg, gray as bone. When he reached for the book, his fingers trembled. The script was in High Valyrian, but even without reading, he sensed its danger. It was a record of Maegor's experiments, attempts to blend dragon and man, to forge a living weapon that could command flame and blood alike. The words spoke of fire unbound, of creatures born screaming and dying in madness. Yet one passage caught Rhaegar's eye. One survived. The prince felt his heart quicken. Could it be true? Could one of these abominations still dwell beneath the keep? He turned the page and found a drawing, rough, hurried. It showed a figure hunched and twisted, with scales like armor and eyes that burned with inner light. Beneath it was scrawled a single phrase: the Maker's sin. A chill crept down his spine. He closed the book and turned to leave, but the sound of movement stopped him. Somewhere in the darkness, stone shifted. He raised his lantern high, the light trembling across the walls. "Who goes there?" he called, his voice echoing softly. No answer came, only the faint scrape of something dragging across the floor. Rhaegar drew the small dagger from his belt, though it felt pitiful in his hand. Slowly, he backed toward the stair. But then he saw it, a shape moving at the edge of the light, crouched low, breathing raggedly. Its skin glimmered faintly, as though coated in scales. His heart pounded. For a moment, the creature's eyes met his, golden, slitted, alive with fire. And then it was gone, vanishing into the blackness beyond the altar. The prince fled the chamber, sealing the door behind him. He did not stop until he stood once more beneath the torchlight of the upper halls, his breath ragged, his lantern guttering out. That night, Rhaegar spoke to no one of what he had seen, but the vision of those burning eyes haunted his sleep, and in the darkness below the Red Keep, something stirred. It had waited long for the touch of dragon's blood. Now, awakened by it, it began to remember hunger. For 3 nights, Rhaegar Targaryen slept little. The memory of those golden eyes followed him wherever he went, lingering at the edges of torchlight, glimmering in the reflection of his bathwater, haunting the notes of the harp songs he played to quiet his thoughts. He told himself it had been a trick of the mind, a shadow cast by his lantern's trembling flame. Yet deep down, he knew it was no illusion. Something had moved in that chamber, something alive. On the 4th night, he could bear the silence no longer. He summoned Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, to his private solar. Arthur arrived in plain travel clothes, his silver sword dawn-sheathed across his back, his face calm as ever. "What troubles you, my prince?" he asked, bowing slightly. Rhaegar hesitated. He trusted Arthur more than any man alive, yet even now, the truth seemed too strange to speak aloud. "There are things beneath this keep," he said at last. "Old things. I found a chamber Maegor sealed with his own hand, and something within it still breathes." Arthur frowned. "You believe there is a creature down there?" "I saw it. Or thought I did," Rhaegar replied. "It was no rat, no trick of the light, and the vault bore the mark of dragonfire. Whatever sleeps beneath the keep, it was forged, not born." Arthur studied him quietly for a time. "If it is real," he said, "then it must be found. Secrets left buried too long tend to crawl their way to the surface." That very night, the 2 men descended again into the dark, with 3 of Rhaegar's most trusted guards, Sir Oswell Went, Sir Jonathor Derry, and a young squire named Miles Waters, whose courage far outstripped his years. They carried torches, ropes, and a single chest of dragon-glass daggers taken from the Targaryen vaults. The stair down seemed longer this time. The air was colder, thick with the scent of rust and ancient dust. When they reached the iron door, Rhaegar saw that the sigils carved into its surface seemed to shimmer faintly, as if breathing with a hidden life. "7 save us," murmured Oswell Went, tracing one of the faces with a gloved finger. Rhaegar turned the wheel again. The groan of the door echoed like thunder. Their torches cast trembling light into the chamber beyond, and at first, all was still. The book still lay upon the altar, though the cracked dragon's egg was gone. "Someone has been here," whispered Miles. Arthur moved forward, his hand on Dawn's hilt. "No man could have passed this door," he said, "not without the prince's key." "Then not a man," murmured Rhaegar. They spread out, their light flickering over the ancient carvings. Strange shapes marked the floor, deep scratches, as though claws had raked across the stone. The air was damp, heavy with a scent of ashes long cold. Then came the sound again, the soft scrape of movement beyond the altar. Rhaegar lifted his torch. "Show yourself," he commanded, his voice steady but cold. "You are in the House of Dragons." At first, nothing stirred. Then, from the shadows, a shape unfolded. Tall as a man, but misshapen, its limbs too long, its back ridged like a dragon's spine. The light revealed scales across its shoulders, dull silver and pale gray, and a face that seemed almost human, save for the slitted eyes that glowed with molten gold. Miles stumbled back with a cry. Oswell raised his sword, but Rhaegar lifted a hand to stay him. The creature cocked its head, its gaze fixed upon the prince. Then, in a voice that rasped like stone grinding on stone, it spoke a single word in broken Valyrian. "Blood!" The word froze them all. Rhaegar's pulse thundered in his ears. "Can you speak more?" he asked in the old tongue. The creature blinked slowly, then pointed a clawed hand toward him. "Dragon. Blood." It hissed again. "Maker. Gone. Hunger. Remains." Arthur stepped forward, placing himself between Rhaegar and the beast. "What is this thing?" he demanded. Rhaegar's gaze did not waver. "A mistake," he whispered. "A remnant of Maegor's madness. The Maker's sin." The creature's breath came harsh and ragged. Its gaze shifted between the men, lingering on their torches. "Fire." "No more," it said. Then, with a sudden guttural roar, it leapt. Chaos erupted. Oswell's sword flashed, biting into scaled flesh. Miles dropped his torch, which rolled sputtering across the floor. Arthur met the creature head-on, dawn gleaming like starlight. Sparks flew as steel met claw. "Hold it!" Rhaegar shouted. "Don't kill it!" But the beast fought with the fury of 10 men, its strength monstrous. It hurled Oswell aside and caught Jonathor's shield in one taloned hand, crushing it like parchment. Arthur struck low, severing one of its arms with a clean silver stroke. The creature screamed, a sound that was neither human nor beastly, and fled into the tunnels beyond, vanishing down a dark passage that gaped open behind the altar. Silence fell, but for their ragged breathing. The prince stared at the blood it had left behind, black and smoking faintly, as though still burning from within. Arthur wiped Dawn clean, his jaw set. "You should have let me finish it," he said. "No," Rhaegar murmured, eyes fixed on the passage. It was alive, it could speak, it remembered. Oswell spat blood from a split lip. Whatever that was, it should have stayed dead. "You've unleashed something cursed." Rhaegar looked at him, his face pale but resolute. "Then it is my duty to end what Maegor began. I will not let another monster bear our name." He stepped toward the darkness of the tunnel. "We follow it. If it lives, it hides for a reason." Arthur laid a hand on his shoulder. "Then we go with you." And so they entered the forgotten passages beneath the Red Keep, places even Maegor's builders had left unmarked on their maps. The stone closed around them like the jaws of some sleeping dragon, and their torches burned low. As they went deeper, they found old bones, blackened with age, and chains that rattled when no wind blew. The air grew thick with the scent of old fire, and sometimes Rhaegar thought he heard the whisper of wings. Hours passed, or perhaps only moments. It was hard to tell in the dark. But at last, the passage opened into a vast cavern, its walls scorched and glistening. In its center lay something that shimmered faintly in the light of their torches, a nest. Within it, half buried in ash and scales, were 3 eggs, one cracked open, 2 still whole, and beside them, curled in the dust, the creature they had wounded. It turned its head weakly as they approached. "Dragon," it whispered again, reaching toward Rhaegar with its remaining hand. "Help me." Rhaegar knelt beside it, pity and horror warring in his chest. "You were not meant to be," he said softly, "but you are." Its golden eyes flickered once more. "Maker made me to burn." Then it shuddered, and its body began to crumble, turning to gray ash before their eyes. When it was gone, only the 2 unbroken eggs remained, each faintly warm to the touch. Arthur's voice was low. "What now, my prince?" Rhaegar gazed down at the eggs, feeling the heat pulse beneath his fingers. "Now," he said, "we learn whether Maegor's curse can ever truly die." And above them, in the sleeping castle of the Dragon Kings, the wind rose suddenly, whispering through the stone like a sigh from the dead. The next morning, Rhaegar stood in the chambers of the maesters, his face pale as frost, the memory of ash and fire still burning in his thoughts. Outside, the bells of the Great Sept tolled softly for morning prayer, their echo drifting through the corridors of the Red Keep like ghosts. He had not slept since their descent into the tunnels. His hands still bore traces of the black dust that had once been the creature's flesh. Maester Pycelle, old and trembling as a willow in a storm, fussed over a collection of scrolls as Rhaegar spoke. "You know the histories of Maegor's reign better than any man alive," the prince said. "Tell me what the records say of his experiments." The maester's watery eyes darted up. "My prince, those were dark times. The tales of Maegor's works are best left to the dust. You are of nobler spirit than he." "Then let us not speak of tales," Rhaegar said, his tone tightening, "but of truth." Pycelle hesitated, then reached for a cracked leather tome sealed with an old ribbon of crimson wax. "There were whispers," he murmured. "Maegor was said to have drawn upon Valyrian rites long forbidden. Some say he sought to forge dragonfire into flesh, to create soldiers who could not burn. But the results were unspeakable. Those who survived were sealed away, their names erased." Rhaegar's gaze hardened. "Not all were destroyed. One lived. I have seen it." The maester's breath caught. "Seen? My prince, that is impossible. Impossible." Rhaegar's voice was quiet but sharp. "I have looked into its eyes. It spoke my name in blood and ash." Pycelle clutched the edge of his table for balance. "Then may the Seven have mercy upon us all. If such things yet draw breath, they are curses born of madness." "Or warnings," Rhaegar said softly. He turned to go. "I would have the library sealed. None but myself and Sir Arthur are to enter." "As you command," the maester stammered, though fear glittered in his eyes. That evening, as dusk painted the city in shades of fire and gold, Rhaegar met again with Arthur Dayne upon the battlements. The wind was heavy with the scent of the sea, and below them the harbor shone with the lights of ships. Arthur leaned against the stone parapet, his expression grave. "You've not spoken since the vault. Tell me what stirs in that mind of yours, my prince." Rhaegar looked east toward the fading horizon. "The creature's words trouble me. Maker gone, hunger remains." It remembered its purpose. It remembered being made to burn. That is not the voice of madness. It is memory. Arthur frowned. And what purpose would Maegor have given it, save to kill? "To endure," Rhaegar said. "To command fire as dragons once did. What if his experiments were not folly, but foresight? What if he sought to preserve the power of our blood when the dragons died?" Arthur's jaw tightened. "And what if he succeeded?" Rhaegar turned toward him. "Then what we found was no monster, but a remnant of that power. Twisted, yes, but proof that dragon's blood can still waken fire in flesh. You speak as if you would follow in Rhaegar's path, Arthur said quietly. Rhaegar's gaze softened. No, my friend, I would undo it. But to undo a curse, one must first understand it. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Arthur nodded once. Whatever comes of this, I stand with you. That night, in the secrecy of his solar, Rhaegar laid the 2 remaining eggs upon a bed of coals. They pulsed faintly, warm beneath his hands, and when he closed his eyes, he thought he could feel a heartbeat within each. He sang softly in High Valyrian, an old song of dragons rising from the sea of smoke. The melody filled the chamber like the murmur of wind through embers. When the song ended, the eggs glowed for a heartbeat longer, then cooled. The next morning, smoke rose from the hearth, though the fire had long burned out. 3 days passed. Rhaegar spent his hours reading, searching through every scroll that spoke of Valyrian bloodcraft and the shaping of fire. He learned of rites meant to bind dragons to men, of spells that had cost more lives than they saved. And always, the words, blood for fire, fire for blood, returned to him, a whisper he could not silence. On the 4th day, a scream echoed through the lower halls. Rhaegar and Arthur were there within moments, finding the corridor filled with smoke and guards shouting in terror. At its end lay a body, one of the kitchen servants, his flesh blackened as if by dragon flame. No torch burned near him, no oil spilled, yet the stones themselves were scorched. Arthur knelt, touching the blackened wall. This was no ordinary fire. Rhaegar's gaze fell upon the floor beside the corpse. There, half melted into the stone, was the faint impression of a claw. He whispered, "It lives." That night, the castle was locked under Rhaegar's order. No one was to enter the lower tunnels, no fires were to be lit outside the kitchens. Yet even in the silence, the servants spoke of strange sounds, of scratching beneath the floors, of low breathing in the walls. When dawn came, Rhaegar descended alone into the tunnels once more. He carried only a torch and his sword. Arthur had begged to follow, but the prince had refused. Some burdens, he said, were borne by blood alone. The air below was colder now, thick with the scent of smoke and something older, something that stirred memories buried deep in his bones. The passage wound downward, and soon he reached the cavern where the eggs had lain. The nest was empty, the ash disturbed, and on the far wall, carved into the stone as if by talon, was a single word written in Valyrian fire: Maker. Rhaegar stood in silence, the flame of his torch flickering wildly in the still air. Somewhere beyond the darkness, he heard the sound of scales against stone, slow and deliberate. He raised his torch high. "I am not your maker," he said, his voice echoing through the cavern. "But I am your kin." The shadows shifted. For a heartbeat, he saw it. The glint of gold, the shimmer of silver scales. Then, the darkness swallowed all. A gust of hot air brushed his face. The smell of brimstone filled his lungs. The creature's voice came again, softer this time, almost sorrowful. "Blood remembers." And before Rhaegar could draw his blade, the flame of his torch flared bright and went out. Only the darkness remained and the slow, steady sound of breathing in the deep. The darkness of the cavern seemed to stretch into eternity. Rhaegar stood motionless, listening to the slow, rasping breath that echoed through the stone. His torch lay at his feet, its flame snuffed out, leaving only the faint red glow that seeped from the fissures in the walls. He drew his sword, its steel whispering as it left the sheath, and held it before him, the blade catching what little light remained. The breathing drew closer. He could feel it now, a slow exhalation of heat that rippled across his face like the sigh of some ancient forge. Then came a sound, a low rumble, not quite a growl, not quite speech. Rhaegar took one step forward. "Show yourself," he said, his voice steady, though his heart thundered in his chest. "If you are of dragon's blood, you have nothing to fear from me." The answer came in the form of a flickering light. A spark of flame flared briefly in the dark, then another. For an instant, the cavern blazed alive, revealing the creature crouched at its far end. It was smaller than before, but more terrible to behold. Its form was closer to that of a man, upright, though its limbs bent wrong, its skin a pale sheen of silver scales. Its face, almost human, bore eyes of molten gold, and around its shoulders, faint and tattered, hung the vestige of wings, half-grown, skeletal things that twitched like dying embers. Rhaegar lowered his sword slightly. "You have changed," he murmured. The creature blinked, its gaze fixed upon him. "Blood made fire," it rasped. "Fire made me." It stepped forward, the heat around it growing with every breath. The prince could see now that the scales along its chest were cracked, glowing faintly at the seams, as though something within it still burned. "What do you want?" Rhaegar asked quietly. The creature tilted its head. "Maker gone. Blood remains. Blood calls." Rhaegar's grip tightened on his sword. "You seek your maker, but Maegor is long dead. You stand before his blood, yet I am no maker. I will not make more monsters." "Monster," it echoed softly, tasting the word. Then, almost with wonder, it said, "You fear me." Rhaegar did not answer. The truth was plain. He feared what it represented, not just the horror of its creation, but the power that slept within it, the fire of old Valyria, broken and reforged into mortal flesh. The creature's golden eyes gleamed brighter. "Fear makes fire burn." And with those words, flame erupted from its hands. The cavern filled with light as the creature's body ignited, not consuming it, but sheathing it in fire. It came toward him, the ground cracking beneath its feet. Rhaegar raised his sword and struck. The steel met flame, and for an instant, light and shadow became one. The blade seared through the creature's shoulder, sending molten blood splattering across the stone. The thing screamed, a sound of fury and pain so fierce that the very air seemed to shatter. Rhaegar staggered back, shielding his face, but when his eyes cleared, the creature was gone, its fire fading into the cracks of the stone. Only a trail of blackened footprints remained. He sank to his knees, his breath ragged, the heat still clinging to him. His sword's edge was warped from the fire. Whatever this being was, it bore the flame of dragons more purely than any Targaryen alive. When he climbed back to the surface, dawn was breaking over King's Landing. The city stirred in ignorance of what slept beneath it. But as Rhaegar crossed the courtyard, he saw a column of smoke rising from the eastern quarter, where the vaults of the pyromancers stood. By the time he reached them, the guild hall was aflame. Green fire burst through the windows, consuming stone and steel alike. The pyromancers wailed that their stores of wildfire had ignited, though none could say how. Rhaegar's blood ran cold. He knew the cause. Later that day, he stood with Arthur in the ruins. The fires still burned, strange and hot, refusing to die. "It is moving through the tunnels," Arthur said grimly. "If it reaches the city above, nothing will stand." Rhaegar nodded. "Then we end it before nightfall." He ordered the lower passages sealed by the king's guard and summoned the pyromancers who remained. Together, they forged a plan, a trap within the heart of the Red Keep. They would flood the ancient tunnels with wildfire and draw the creature into it. If it was born of fire, it would die by fire. As night fell, Rhaegar returned to the cavern one last time. He carried no sword now, only a torch and a single vial of wildfire. Arthur waited at the entrance, ready to seal it once Rhaegar gave the word. The prince walked alone into the dark. The air was thick with smoke and the faint rhythmic beating of wings. The creature stood waiting by the nest of ashes, its form shimmering with heat. Rhaegar raised the torch. "This ends here," he said. The creature's head tilted. "End?" it whispered. "Fire never ends." It stepped closer. "Blood remembers, fire obeys." Rhaegar's heart twisted. "Then remember this. Blood can choose." He hurled the vial of wildfire to the ground. The glass shattered, spilling green flame across the cavern. The air exploded. Fire roared upward, a living inferno that swallowed all. Rhaegar turned and ran, the heat clawing at his back. He could feel the creature's scream echoing through the flames, a sound both human and not, full of rage and sorrow. He reached the stair, and Arthur's hand seized his arm, pulling him through the narrowing doorway. Together they sealed the gate as the fire consumed the darkness below. For a long time, neither man spoke. They stood in the dim corridor, watching as smoke coiled through the cracks of the stone. Finally, Arthur broke the silence. "Is it done?" Rhaegar looked at his hands. They were blackened, the skin blistered from the heat. "For now," he said softly. "But I have seen what sleeps in our blood, Arthur. We think ourselves the masters of fire, but it is fire that masters us." Arthur's gaze lingered on him. "Then perhaps," he said, "that is the curse of dragons." Outside, the bells of King's Landing rang for midnight. The fire below smoldered unseen, and in the ashes of the cavern, where no man dared to tread, something glowed faintly beneath the stone, a single scale, unburnt, pulsing once with light before going dark. For many days, the Red Keep held its breath. No one spoke of what had burned beneath its stones, though every servant whispered of strange lights that had danced through the cracks of the floors, and of screams that had come not from men, but from the earth itself. The air reeked faintly of smoke, even after the pyromancers swore their fires were long spent. Rhaegar Targaryen moved through the halls like a man half-haunted. His hands still bore faint scars from the heat. His eyes seemed ever fixed upon something far away. Only Arthur Dayne knew the truth of what had happened beneath the keep, and even he did not speak of it openly. But though the creature's body had been consumed by flame, Rhaegar felt in his heart that it was not truly gone. Each night, when he closed his eyes, he dreamed of the golden eyes that had stared into his soul. He dreamed of fire crawling beneath his skin, of wings rising from his back, and of voices whispering from the depths, voices speaking in the old tongue of Valyria, promising glory, promising ruin. At last, unable to bear the silence, he returned to the royal library. Dust lay heavy upon the tomes of Valyria, their pages brittle with age. By candlelight, he read until his eyes burned, searching for any mention of the Maker's sin. He found it not in the grand histories, but in a forgotten journal bound in red leather. The handwriting was rough, the words desperate. "The Dragon Lords sought to bind flame to flesh," it read. "They believed the old fire dying, and in their fear, they wove blood and fire together. But the fire does not serve. It consumes. The stronger the blood, the hotter it burns. The greatest of them learned too late that they were making not dragon lords, but monsters who would one day burn the world." Rhaegar shut the book slowly. The fire, he thought, was not an inheritance. It was a hunger, and he, by seeking to master it, had fed it again. That night, he walked the quiet corridors of the keep, his footsteps echoing faintly. He passed beneath the Iron Throne, that cruel monument of twisted blades. The moonlight through the high windows fell upon its jagged surface, gleaming like frozen fire. He imagined his father, King Aerys, seated there, his hands trembling, his eyes alight with the madness of fire. The last of the Dragon Lords, he thought bitterly, and he is no king at all. Only a man who mistook his sickness for prophecy. Rhaegar turned away, his heart heavy. When dawn broke, Sir Arthur found him upon the practice grounds, alone and sleepless, his sword flashing again and again against a straw dummy until it was cut to rags. "You cannot fight what is gone," Arthur said softly. Rhaegar sheathed his blade. "It is not gone. The blood remembers." Arthur frowned. "You burned it to ash. You saw it die." "Did I?" Rhaegar's eyes were far away. "I saw Maegor's fire live again after a century of silence. What is one flame to another? What if the fire has found another host?" Arthur hesitated. "You think it has escaped?" "I think," Rhaegar said slowly, "that fire seeks its kin." In the days that followed, strange things began to happen in the castle. A guard was found in the armory. His armor melted though no flame had touched him. A horse in the royal stables went mad, snorting smoke from its nostrils before collapsing in ash. The maesters spoke of alchemical accidents, but Rhaegar knew better. Something unseen moved within the walls. He ordered the Red Keep searched from cellar to tower, though he told no one what they were hunting. It was Arthur who found the first sign, a pattern of claw marks upon the flagstones near the dragon pit's ruined gate. "The creature is gone from the keep," Arthur said when he brought the news, "but it has not gone far." That evening, Rhaegar rode out under the cover of night. The moon was pale and thin above the city, casting its ghostly light upon the ruins of the dragon pit. The air there was heavy with memory, centuries of dragon's bones and the scent of old fire. He dismounted and walked among the shattered stones, his torch casting long shadows. "If you can hear me," he said quietly, "I did not come to kill you. You are not Maegor's sin. You are his punishment. But if your fire spreads beyond this place, I will end it myself." The wind shifted. From deep within the ruin came a low sound, half growl, half sigh. Rhaegar lifted his torch, and there it was again. Two golden eyes gleaming in the dark. The creature emerged slowly, limping, its body scarred from fire yet alive. But it was changed. Its wings had grown, stretching wide and strong, their edges trailing sparks. The scales upon its skin shimmered like molten steel, and when it spoke, its voice was clearer than before. "Fire cannot die," it said, "only sleep." Rhaegar stood his ground. "Why have you come here?" The creature's gaze fell upon the dragon bones scattered across the floor. "They called to me. I remember them. Their blood sings." "You were made of men and dragons both," Rhaegar said. "You have no place among either." The creature's head tilted. "And you, Prince of Fire, what place is yours? You seek prophecy, not peace. You would burn the world to sing your song." The words struck like a blow. "You know nothing of me." "I know your blood," it hissed. "I was born of it. The hunger that made me burns in you. You are the Maker's heir." The ground trembled as it spread its wings. Fire gathered in its throat, swirling bright as the heart of a forge. Rhaegar barely leapt aside before the flame burst forth, searing the stone. His torch fell, snuffed out in the blast. He drew his sword, its steel glowing red in the heat, then let the fire judge us both. The battle that followed was swift and terrible. The creature lunged, claws striking sparks from stone. Rhaegar met it, blow for blow, his blade cutting through scales and flame alike. The air burned around them, filling his lungs with smoke. At last, he struck a deep wound beneath its ribs. The creature staggered, its fire dimming. Rhaegar raised his sword for the final stroke, but it looked up at him, its eyes no longer filled with fury but sorrow. "You cannot kill me," it whispered. "You are me." Then it fell still. When dawn came, the dragon pit was silent. Only ashes remained where the creature had lain. Rhaegar stood among them, his face pale, his sword blackened from heat. The wind carried away the ashes, scattering them over the sleeping city. Arthur found him there hours later, kneeling amidst the bones. "Is it over?" he asked. Rhaegar looked up slowly. "Nothing that is born of fire ever truly ends." He rose, his eyes reflecting the rising sun. "The makers of monsters are not the men who build them, Arthur. They are the ones who believe they can control them." And as he turned back toward the Red Keep, the wind shifted again, carrying with it a faint whisper of wings far above, like embers refusing to die. Autumn crept into King's Landing like a thief, dimming the sun and draping the city in gray. The small folk went about their days unaware of the fire that had nearly consumed them, their laughter and quarrels echoing faintly through the narrow streets. Yet in the Red Keep, unease lingered like smoke that would not lift. Servants whispered that the prince had changed, that his eyes, once bright with dreams of songs and prophecies, now burned with the quiet intensity of one who had glimpsed the abyss and could not look away. Rhaegar withdrew from the feasts and the courtly games. He took to walking the halls at night, alone save for the sound of his own footsteps. The memory of the creature's final words haunted him. "You are me." They had pierced deeper than any wound. He had slain it, or thought he had, but sometimes, in the stillness of the keep, he would feel a faint warmth beneath his skin, like an ember buried deep. Sometimes, his breath misted in the air even when no wind stirred. And sometimes, when he looked into the brazier's fire, he thought he saw golden eyes staring back. Sir Arthur Dane kept close watch over him, though he spoke little of his concern. One evening, he found Rhaegar in the courtyard beneath the great weirwood that clung stubbornly to life among the stone gardens. The prince was staring into its pale leaves, lost in thought. "You haven't eaten since morning," Arthur said. "You'll waste away before the snows reach the city." Rhaegar smiled faintly. Perhaps that would be mercy. Arthur frowned. "You fought a monster and lived. Few men could claim as much." Rhaegar turned his gaze skyward. The clouds above were bruised purple with the promise of rain. "And if I brought that monster to life again by slaying it?" "Fire changes form, Arthur. It does not die." Arthur studied him quietly. "You've been reading too much prophecy. The past cannot be undone nor rewritten." Rhaegar's lips curved into a distant smile. "That is where you are wrong. The past is written in blood, and blood can always be spilled anew." A gust of wind rustled the weirwood's leaves, their white faces whispering softly in the dusk. Arthur saw something then, a faint shimmer of light upon Rhaegar's hand, as though the veins beneath his skin glowed for an instant before fading. He said nothing. That night, a storm rolled in from the sea. Lightning clawed the sky, and thunder shook the keep. Rhaegar sat before his hearth, staring into the flames. The song he had once written for Lyanna Stark, his song of ice and fire, echoed faintly in his mind, its melody now twisted by darker chords. He rose and went to the window. The city below lay shrouded in rain, the streets glistening like rivers of black glass, and far beyond the walls, atop the distant hill where the dragon pit had stood. He saw it, a flicker of light that did not belong to the storm. A faint, steady glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. Rhaegar's breath caught. "No," he whispered. But the glow did not fade. By dawn, he was already riding through the empty streets, Arthur at his side. The rain had ceased, leaving the world silent and cold. When they reached the hill, the ruins of the dragon pit were smoking once more. The air shimmered with heat, though no flame was visible. "By the Seven," Arthur muttered. "How can it be?" Rhaegar dismounted and knelt beside the scorched stones. The earth was warm. The ashes of the creature had not scattered after all. They had seeped into the ground, black veins running deep into the rock. He pressed his hand to the soil. It throbbed faintly beneath his palm, like a living thing. "The fire sleeps," he murmured, "but it dreams." Arthur drew Dawn, its pale blade gleaming in the half-light. "Then we bury it deeper." "No," Rhaegar said quickly. "It cannot be destroyed by fire or steel. It was born of both. We must understand it." Arthur looked at him sharply. "You mean to study it? After what it's done? Would you rather wait until it wakes again?" Rhaegar's tone was calm, but his eyes burned with that strange intensity Arthur had come to dread. "If the fire has chosen to remember, then perhaps it remembers for a reason." That night, Rhaegar returned alone once more. The wind moaned through the broken arches, carrying the scent of rain and ash. He brought no torch this time. The faint glow from beneath the stones was light enough. He knelt where the creature had fallen, where he had struck the final blow. The ground pulsed softly beneath his hand. "I know you hear me," he said. "If you are truly born of dragon blood, then we are kin. Show me what you seek." The answer came not in words, but in sensation, a rush of heat through his veins, a blaze of color behind his eyes. He saw flashes of memory not his own, the forge of Valyria, where men in dragon masks chanted before rivers of molten gold, the screams of captives bound in chains of fire, the first shaping of scales from human flesh. Then he saw Maegor, the cruel king himself, standing above the altar, his hands red with blood, and beyond him a figure cloaked in smoke, whispering in a tongue older than the world. Rhaegar gasped, stumbling back. His breath came in ragged bursts. The images faded, but the heat remained. He looked down at his palms and saw faint red lines glowing beneath the skin. Winding like the veins of molten stone, he fled the ruins before dawn, but the warmth did not fade. It followed him back to the Red Keep, thrumming beneath his ribs like a second heartbeat. Arthur found him in his chambers at sunrise, drenched in sweat, his hands trembling. "You went back," the knight said. "Seven, save us, Rhaegar. What have you done?" "I saw him," Rhaegar whispered. "Maegor, and something older still. They made the fire, Arthur, but they did not master it. It used them." Arthur reached for him, but Rhaegar pulled away, eyes bright with fevered purpose. "Don't you see? It was never about dragons or monsters. It was about the blood itself. The flame was meant to awaken what sleeps within it." "Enough," Arthur said sharply. "You speak like your father." Rhaegar froze. For a long time, the only sound was the rain against the windows. Then, softly, he said, "Perhaps that is why he burns. Perhaps he too was touched by what sleeps." Arthur stepped forward, gripping his shoulder. "Whatever you saw, let it die with the ashes. Do not carry it further." But even as the knight spoke, Rhaegar's gaze drifted to the hearth, where the embers flared brighter, as though answering his thoughts. Outside, thunder rolled once more over the city, but it was not the storm that made the Meisters murmur in the morning. It was the faint scent of smoke that clung to the prince wherever he went, and the whisper among the servants that when Rhaegar Targaryen passed by, candles burned higher, and flames bowed toward him as though greeting their true king. The days that followed were uneasy ones in the Red Keep. Though no fire blazed openly, the scent of smoke seemed to linger in every corridor. Meisters claimed it was a trick of the mind, old stone breathing out what had been sealed for centuries, but the servants whispered otherwise. They said the prince carried the smell of ash with him, that the air grew warmer when he entered a room, and that candle flames leaned toward him as though drawn by unseen winds. Rhaegar himself said little. He attended the council meetings in silence, his face pale, his silver hair damp with sweat no matter the season. King Aerys watched him with the nervous, fevered eyes of a man who had begun to see enemies in every shadow. "The boy burns too bright," the Mad King muttered one night. "The gods made him fire, but fire turns on its masters." The court grew fearful. Only Arthur Dayne remained close, though even he found the prince's gaze strange, hard and distant, as though fixed upon something no mortal eye could see. It was on a moonless night that the dreams began again. Rhaegar woke drenched in sweat, his breath ragged. The fire in his hearth had burned down to embers, yet his chamber glowed with a dull red light. He rose and went to the mirror, and there for an instant saw not his own reflection, but the creature's golden eyes staring back at him. His pulse thundered, the vision vanished, leaving him staring at his own face, haunted, pale, and far older than his years. He fled his chamber, walking the halls until dawn. The fire within him grew stronger each night thereafter. It was no longer a warmth, but a hunger, a restless stirring in his blood, whispering of wings and flame. By the time the first snows touched the city's high towers, Rhaegar had begun to act upon the whispers. He descended once more to the vaults beneath the keep, the place where Maegor's door still stood sealed. Arthur found him there one night, his hand pressed against the iron, his expression feverish. "You swore you'd never come back here," Arthur said quietly. "I swore to end it," Rhaegar replied without turning. "But it isn't ended. It's waiting. I feel it calling me." Arthur's hand went to the hilt of dawn. "Then it calls you to ruin. You've seen what lies beyond that door." Rhaegar faced him, and for the first time Arthur saw the faint glimmer in his prince's eyes. Not madness, but fire. "What if it calls me to understanding? What if what Rhaegar began must be finished, not for power, but for prophecy?" "Prophecy?" Rhaegar stepped closer, his voice low and fervent. "You've read the tales, Arthur. Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, the one who would wake dragons from stone. What if that fire was never meant for dragons of scale, but for dragons of flesh and blood?" Arthur stared. "You mean to make yourself one of them?" "I mean to end what Rhaegar could not control," Rhaegar said. "To master it, to prove that fire can be bound by will." Arthur's voice dropped to a whisper. "You would play the same game as the Maker." "Perhaps I was born to." The silence between them stretched long. At last, Arthur sheathed his sword. "If you do this, you will not walk out again. The fire will claim you, as it claimed all the rest." "Then so be it," Rhaegar said. Arthur watched him for a moment longer, then turned away. "Then I'll wait here. If you do not return by dawn, I'll seal the door myself." Rhaegar said nothing. He turned the wheel, and the ancient hinges groaned open once more. Heat breathed from the darkness beyond, and the smell of old ash washed over them. He took a single lantern and stepped inside. The chamber was as he remembered it, vast, silent, lined with the marks of forgotten rituals. The black altar stood at its center, the old book still resting upon it. But something else had changed. The sigils on the floor glowed faintly, as though fed by a slow, unseen fire. Rhaegar approached the altar. The cracked dragon egg that had once lain beside the book was gone, but in its place rested a scale. Not gray and dead as before, but alive with light, pulsing like a heart. He reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the scale, the warmth within him flared into flame. The cavern blazed with red light, shadows writhing like serpents. The book opened of its own accord, pages fluttering to the middle where a single line burned in Valyrian script. Blood is the key. Fire is the door. Rhaegar understood. He drew his dagger and cut his palm. Blood spilled across the altar, hissing as it met the glowing sigils. The ground trembled. From the walls, a wind rose, not cold but burning, a rush of heat that howled like a dragon's cry. The scale before him split apart, releasing a breath of smoke and gold. The light grew unbearable, and in it he saw shapes, ancient Valyrians chanting, their faces hidden behind masks of fire. He saw dragons soaring over black skies, their wings beating in rhythm with his own heart. Then the light folded inward and struck him. Arthur, waiting outside, heard the scream. He surged forward, but the heat drove him back. The door itself had grown too hot to touch. Flames leaked through its cracks, the air thick with the stench of burning. He called Rhaegar's name again and again, but there was no answer, only the roar of fire, vast and terrible. When dawn broke, the flames subsided. The iron door had cooled, its surface blackened but whole. Arthur forced it open and stepped into the chamber. The altar was scorched, the book reduced to ash. Of Rhaegar there was no sign, save for his silver circlet lying melted upon the stone. And yet, when Arthur turned to leave, he felt a gust of wind rush past him, hot and alive. The torches along the corridor flared to life, though no hand touched them. He looked back toward the darkness and whispered, "Rhaegar?" The only reply was a distant sound, a rumble that might have been thunder, or the beating of wings deep beneath the earth. Arthur sealed the vault and told no one what he had seen. But that night, when the moon rose over King's Landing, a column of smoke lifted silently from the hill of the Red Keep, rising straight into the sky. And in the still hours before dawn, the people of the city dreamed as one. They dreamed of fire spreading across the world, of a prince crowned in flame who walked between life and death. They dreamed of Rhaegar Targaryen, reborn in ash, the last and truest son of the dragon. And when they woke, their hearts beat faster, though they knew not why. For though the prince was gone, the fire had not died. It waited, patient and hungry, for the day when his blood would sing again. When spring came to King's Landing, the city seemed brighter, yet beneath its laughter lay unease. The bells rang for the changing season, and the harbor thrummed with trade, but the air still carried that faint tang of ash. The small folk said it was only the smoke of the pyromancer's forges, or the breath of dragons sleeping deep beneath the castle stones. Yet those who had glimpsed the prince before his disappearance whispered that the fire itself had followed him, and that now the keep's very walls remembered his heat. Arthur Dayne alone knew the truth, that Rhaegar Targaryen was gone, vanished into the vaults below Maegor's holdfast, consumed by the fire he had sought to master. The king had raved when told his son was missing. "He seeks to supplant me," Aerys cried, pacing like a madman upon the Iron Throne. "He burns for my crown, but I am the dragon. Let him choke on his own flame." The court trembled, for in the king's madness, truth often hid like a serpent beneath the grass. Yet Arthur said nothing. He bore the prince's sword and the memory of his scream in silence. Weeks turned to months. Summer came, fierce and golden. But at night, the Red Keep grew strangely warm. Guards claimed to hear low rumblings beneath their feet, like distant thunder. Once, a boy cleaning the lower halls swore that the stones themselves glowed faintly red before cooling to black again. The Meisters dismissed it as fancy, though they themselves began to sweat through their robes when they descended too deep. Then came the night of the blood moon. It rose over Blackwater Bay like an omen, vast, red, and heavy with light. The city's taverns fell quiet, the dogs whined, and in the king's chambers, Aerys Targaryen raved louder than ever, screaming of fire and betrayal. Arthur stood watch upon the battlements, his sword dawn gleaming silver in the ruddy light. The air was too still, the sea too calm. Then he heard it, a sound that made his heart still. A roar, faint at first, like the groaning of earth beneath stone, then stronger, louder, not wind, not storm, something living, something ancient. Arthur ran. He descended the tower stairs and burst into the courtyard where soldiers and servants alike stared wide-eyed toward the hill of the Red Keep. From its heart, a column of smoke rose straight into the night, tinged with crimson. The ground shuddered. Stones split. Windows shattered in a rain of sparks. And from the depths below, Maegor's holdfast, came fire. It burst through the courtyard like a geyser, molten and alive, yet no wildfire burned so cleanly. The flames were white and gold, twisting skyward in the shape of wings. Men fled screaming. Bells clanged in panic. The heat was so fierce that banners turned to ash before the wind could carry them away. Arthur fell to his knees, shielding his face, and in that blazing light he saw it, something rising through the fire. Not a beast, though the shape was monstrous. Not holy man, though he walked upright. Silver scales shimmered across his skin, and his eyes blazed with molten gold. His hair, long and pale, flowed like a river of light. Rhaegar. Arthur's breath caught. By the gods! The figure turned. His face was Rhaegar's, and yet not. It bore the prince's beauty, his sorrow, but also something beyond human, something born of flame. His voice, when it came, was low and echoing, as though two voices spoke in unison. "The fire sleeps no longer," he said. "The blood has woken." Arthur stumbled forward, his sword drawn though his heart quailed. "Rhaegar, what have you done?" The prince looked at him, and in that gaze Arthur saw both mercy and ruin. "I am what they made me," Rhaegar said softly. "What Maegor dreamed, what Valyria feared, the fire chose." "Then fight it," Arthur cried. "You are no monster. You are my prince." Rhaegar's expression faltered, grief passing like a shadow across his face. "If I fight it, the world burns. If I yield, it dies. Tell me, Arthur, what would you have me choose?" Before Arthur could answer, another voice cut through the night, the shrill cry of the king. Aerys stood upon the balcony above, his hair wild, his eyes gleaming with madness. "Traitor, abomination," he screamed. "You would steal my throne, but I am the dragon. I am fire made flesh." He raised his hands, and from behind him, the pyromancers came bearing jars of wildfire. "No!" Arthur shouted. The king hurled the first jar into the courtyard. Green flame erupted, clashing with gold. The air screamed. Rhaegar raised his arms, and the fire bent away from him, curling like living things. The heat was unbearable. Men fell where they stood. Arthur tried to reach him, but the ground split between them. Rhaegar looked up at his father. "You are not the dragon," he said quietly. You are its echo." Eris laughed, a sound of madness and terror both. "Then burn me if you dare." The words hung in the air like a curse. Rhaegar hesitated. The fire swirled around him, hungry and bright. Then, with a cry that shook the heavens, he spread his arms wide. The golden flame leapt skyward, engulfing the balcony, the towers, the night itself. Arthur was thrown to the ground, his vision filled with light. When he rose again, half the Red Keep was aflame. The balcony was gone. So was the king. And Rhaegar stood at the heart of the inferno, untouched. He turned once more to Arthur, his expression calm, almost peaceful. "The fire has no master," he said, "only purpose." Arthur stepped forward, tears cutting tracks through the soot on his face. "Come back," he begged. "For the love you bore Elia, for your children, for the realm, come back." Rhaegar's eyes softened. "There is no going back, but my blood will return. Tell them, Arthur. Tell them the song is not ended. Tell them the dragon sleeps within the blood of man." Then the light consumed him. When the fire died at last, the Red Keep stood half in ruin, and of Rhaegar, Targaryen, no trace remained. Only ashes and a single white scale, still warm to the touch, lying where he had stood. Arthur took it in silence. The king was dead. The realm would soon tear itself apart in war. Yet as he gazed at the dawn breaking over the city, he thought he heard a faint sound upon the wind, a whisper like the beating of wings, fading into the rising sun. And though the world mourned the prince who had burned, Arthur Dayne alone knew the truth. Rhaegar had not perished. He had become what the dragon lords had always sought but never achieved. Fire given form, will bound to flame. The makers of monsters had wrought their final creation, and it bore not hatred but sorrow. For the fire of the dragon was not evil, it was eternal, waiting only for the blood that could bear its song again. The ruins of the Red Keep smoldered for 7 days and 7 nights. No pyromancer dared go near, for the heat that lingered there was no earthly fire. When the ashes cooled at last, the court gathered in fearful silence. King Aerys was dead, his bones melted to black glass, and his son, the prince who had burned but not burned, was gone. The maesters declared it an accident of wildfire. The small folk whispered of divine punishment. But among the King's Guard, only Arthur Dayne knew the truth. He had seen Rhaegar's rebirth with his own eyes, had felt the wind from those unseen wings. And when he rode from the city at dawn, the white scale clutched in his hand, he swore no word of it would pass his lips. He rode south, across the Blackwater, and beyond the King's Road, seeking solitude and counsel. The realm had begun to fracture. Lords whispered of rebellion, of a Baratheon in the Stormlands who raised banners against the crown. Blood would soon spill again. Yet Arthur's thoughts were not of thrones, but of the fire that had taken his prince. He found no rest in the Stormlands. Even beneath open sky, he felt the warmth of the scale through his armor, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Sometimes at night, as he camped beneath the stars, it would glow pale gold, and he thought he could hear faint music, a harp's string trembling far away. One night, he dreamed. He stood upon a field of ash. The sky above him burned red as molten iron. Rhaegar was there, but changed. His body was wreathed in fire, his eyes twin suns. Around him lay the bones of dragons, vast and ancient. "Arthur," said the voice that was not wholly his, "do not mourn. Fire does not die, it transforms." Arthur reached toward him. "What have you become?" "What I was always meant to be," said the Prince of Flame. "What Maegor tried to forge with madness, I have found in purpose. The fire of the dragon is the fire of prophecy, and prophecy is never kind. Arthur shook his head. You speak as if your soul is gone. Not gone, Rhaegar said softly. Changed. I have seen beyond the wall of night. There is a cold coming, a darkness that no sword can cleave. Only fire can stand against it. You must protect what remains of my blood, for through it the fire will sing again. Before Arthur could answer, the vision broke. He woke beneath the stars, the scale in his hand burning bright as dawn. He hurled it away, but it landed in the grass and went dark once more. The next morning, riders from the Reach found him. They bore word that Robert Baratheon had raised his banners, that the crown prince was dead, slain at the Trident by the usurper's hammer. Arthur said nothing. He rode north with the wind cold on his back, carrying his silence like a shroud. Yet when he reached the Tower of Joy, he found not silence, but cries. Lyanna Stark lay within, pale as snow, her hair dark with sweat. The midwives trembled before her, for her time had come too soon. Eddard Stark stood beside the bed, hollow-eyed, and at her side lay the babe she had just born, a boy with silver hair and eyes the color of smoke. Arthur, Ned said, his voice low. She calls for you. Arthur approached. Lyanna's lips were dry, her voice weak. Where is he? Arthur knelt beside her. Gone, he said softly, but his fire remains. Tears glimmered in her eyes. Promise me, Sir Arthur, she whispered. Promise me he will live. He took her hand. By the dawn, I swear it. Her grip loosened, and she was gone. Arthur looked down at the child. The babe was silent, his small chest rising and falling with measured calm. In the dim light, Arthur saw a faint shimmer upon the skin of his brow. Not scales, but something subtler, a sheen like the reflection of flame on water. When the boy opened his eyes, for an instant, they glowed with pale gold before softening to gray. Arthur shuddered. The prince's words echoed in his mind. Protect what remains of my blood. Through it, the fire will sing again. He turned to Eddard Stark. You must take him, Arthur said. Hide him. Tell no one whose son he is. Ned stared at him. And you? I will see to the others, but I fear my oath to your sister binds me more than my vows ever did. He handed the child to Ned, who wrapped him in a cloak of gray and red. The babe did not cry. Only a faint warmth lingered in his touch, a heartbeat stronger than any infant's should be. When they parted, the Tower of Joy fell silent once more. Arthur lingered long after Ned's riders had gone. He buried Lyanna beneath the weirwood on the hill and sat beside her grave, the white scale in his hand. The dawn came red that day, and as the sun rose, the scale warmed again. Your son lives, he murmured to the wind, and if prophecy is true, your song will one day rise in him. The air stirred. For a moment, he thought he saw a figure standing in the light, Rhaegar, draped in fire, smiling faintly. Then the vision was gone, and only the wind remained. That night, Arthur cast the white scale into the heart of the tower's hearth. The flames leapt higher, burning pure and white, and in their glow he felt peace at last. When dawn broke again, he rode alone into the desert, leaving behind the tower, the graves, and the past. Years later, when war had turned to ashes and peace had become a ghost, shepherds wandering the red mountains spoke of a strange fire that burned high in the peaks, a flame that never dimmed, even in rain. They said a lone knight watched over it, his hair pale as starlight, his sword gleaming like the morning sun. And sometimes, on nights when the wind blew down from the mountains, travelers swore they heard faint music drifting through the darkness, a harp's song, sorrowful and beautiful, carrying words no one could quite remember. It was a song of kings and prophecy, of fire and rebirth. A song that spoke of a boy with dragon's blood sleeping beneath northern snow, and of the fire within him that would one day wake the world. And so the tale of the Maker's sin passed into legend, twisted by time, buried beneath rumor and war. But the truth endured in whispers, that Rhaegar Targaryen had not died at the trident, nor in flame, but had been transformed, that his fire lived on in the veins of his son. For the dragon was never meant to rule thrones of iron or gold. The dragon was meant to awaken the dawn. Snow fell upon the ruins of Summerhall like ghosts returning to mourn. The castle's burned stones jutted from the white drifts, like the bones of a great beast long dead, and the wind that swept through the shattered halls sang with the hollow cry of forgotten fire. Few men dared ride that way now, for the place was cursed, they said, a wound upon the world where dragon's blood had turned against itself. Yet one rider came, cloaked in gray, his helm drawn low. Arthur Dane dismounted before the blackened gate, his breath steaming in the cold. Years had passed since the Tower of Joy, yet the memory of Rhaegar's voice still echoed in his mind. He had ridden north, south, and farther still, seeking peace, but peace eluded him. The white scale that once burned in his hand was gone, consumed by fire, but the mark it left upon his soul remained. He entered the ruins in silence. The snow muffled his steps as he walked the scorched courtyard where, long ago, fire had devoured a king's dreams. Here had died the last dragons of House Targaryen, or so the maesters claimed. Arthur knew better. Dragons died not in flesh, but in memory, and memory was a fire that never truly went out. At the heart of the ruin, the stones were still black with soot. There, beneath the open sky, he knelt. His breath caught, for he felt a warmth in the ground, faint but real. The fire was here too, sleeping beneath the snow. He drew dawn and placed the blade before him. "I kept my oath," he murmured to the cold wind. "Your blood lives. The boy grows strong." The wind seemed to answer, a low sigh that stirred the ashes. For a heartbeat, Arthur thought he saw the outline of wings in the drifting snow, vast and silent. Then the vision faded. He rose, his cloak brushing against the stones. The world had changed beyond recognition. The usurper's reign had settled over Westeros like a long winter. The Mad King's ashes had scattered to the wind, and his son, his truest son, had been forgotten by all but a few. Yet Arthur felt the pulse of destiny still, a thread of fire weaving unseen through the world. He left Summerhall that night, but its warmth followed him. Far to the north, beyond Winterfell's gray walls, a storm gathered. Ned Stark rode out across the snowfields, his horse's hooves crunching through the frost. The boy he had taken from Dorne had grown, strong, quiet, and solemn, with a mind sharp as a blade. The world called him Jon Snow, a bastard of Winterfell, but Ned alone knew the truth of his birth, though he never dared speak it. Sometimes in the stillness of night, he would look upon the boy sleeping before the fire and think he saw a shimmer about him, a faint light beneath his skin. It frightened him, though he did not know why. Jon grew tall and lean, his eyes gray but deep with something more, something older. He learned the sword quickly, his movements graceful and sure. The other boys said he fought like a shadow, silent and burning. When asked where he had learned, Jon would only say, "It feels as though I always knew." One winter morning, when the sun rose weak over the wall, Jon found a bird waiting on the windowsill of his chamber, a raven black as pitch, its eyes gleaming gold. It bore no message, no ribbon, no mark of house or king. Yet when Jon reached toward it, the creature did not flee. It tilted its head and uttered a single word in a voice almost human. Blood. Jon froze. What did you say? The raven blinked and croaked again. Fire. Then it spread its wings and was gone, leaving only a single white feather behind. He kept the feather hidden in his cloak for many days. At night, he would dream of strange places, cities of black stone bathed in flame, and of a man with hair of silver standing beside a great winged shadow. He could never see the man's face clearly, but in his heart he felt the weight of kinship, as though he looked upon a ghost who shared his blood. When he told Lord Stark of his dreams, Ned only said, "Some dreams are best forgotten." But there was fear in his eyes. That winter grew long, and the nights longer still. Strange lights were seen beyond the wall, and rangers whispered of things stirring in the snow, things older than men, colder than death. In those days, the realm's lords thought only of their petty wars, blind to the greater shadow creeping from the north. But the old gods knew. The fire and the cold had begun to move once more, each calling to its other. One night, as a blizzard raged across Winterfell, Jon stood alone in the Godswood. The weirwood's red eyes stared down at him, and the face carved upon its trunk seemed almost alive. He knelt in the snow, his breath misting in the air. "If I am a bastard, why do I dream of dragons?" he whispered. The wind answered with a low sigh. The branches stirred, and the flame of the nearest torch flared high, its light dancing over his face. For an instant, the reflection in his eyes was not of fire, but of golden light. Then the flame dimmed, and the night closed around him once more. Far away, in a land of dust and bone, a man who had once been called the Sword of the Morning sat beside a dying fire. His hair was streaked with gray, his armor dulled with time, but his eyes still watched the horizon as though searching for something lost. When he closed them, he could hear a faint echo. Rhaegar's voice, soft and sorrowful, carried on the wind. "The fire will sing again." Arthur looked to the east, where the first light of dawn broke over the mountains. "Then let it sing," he murmured, "but may it never burn as it once did." He rose and mounted his horse. Behind him, the fire sputtered and died, but for a moment before it faded, the embers formed the shape of a dragon's wings. And so the years turned. The boy grew to manhood, the snows deepened, and whispers of prophecy stirred once more. Masters would later write that the age of dragons was gone, that their bones slept silent beneath the earth. Yet in hidden dreams, in the blood of one who bore the name Snow, the fire waited still, patient, remembering, and ready. For fire does not perish, and the blood of dragons never forgets its song. The winter deepened, swallowing the north in silence. The long nights stretched endless, and the winds howled through the broken towers of Winterfell like mourning ghosts. Yet amid that quiet chill, the boy called Jon Snow grew into a man of 17 years, tall and lean, his movements sure as if he carried the memory of 100 battles within his blood. He did not know why the dreams had returned, only that they haunted him like whispers from another life. He saw fields of fire stretching to the horizon, dragons rising from ash, and a man with silver hair standing upon a mountain of bone, his eyes twin furnaces of sorrow. Each time Jon woke, his chamber smelled faintly of smoke, though the hearth lay cold. Old Nan said such dreams were omens. "The old gods send warnings in the dark," she croaked. "Fire or ice, boy, it matters little, both burn in the end. Jon smiled faintly at her tales, yet when he was alone, he would stand before the godswood and stare into the reflection of his face in the frozen pool. Sometimes the water shimmered, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw another face beside his own, a prince's face, pale and proud. When word came that his uncle Benjen would ride to the wall again, Jon begged to go with him. Lord Stark hesitated long before granting his leave. "The wall is not a place for boys," Ned said. "I am no boy," Jon answered, "and I will not live forever in another man's shadow." Ned looked at him for a long moment, and something unspoken passed between them. "So be it," he said at last. That night, Ned Stark lingered in the crypts beneath Winterfell. Before the stone statue of Lyanna, he knelt. "I have kept my promise," he whispered to the cold. "But the fire grows. I see it in his eyes, and I cannot smother it forever." The wind that sighed through the tunnels sounded almost like a voice, though none but Ned heard it. Blood remembers. The journey to Castle Black was a trial of snow and silence. Jon rode beside Benjen through forests rimed with frost, the cold seeping into his bones. At night, the fire gave no warmth, and he found himself staring into its depths, lost in thought. On the third night, as snow drifted over their camp, Jon awoke to find the fire still burning, though no one had fed it. The flames were strange, gold and white instead of red, and at their heart danced a shadow that moved like wings. He reached toward it, half in fear, half in wonder. The flame flared, and he saw visions again, dragons soaring above a city of smoke, a sword forged in the heart of a dying star, and a woman weeping beside a cradle. Then the vision changed. He stood before the wall, though not as it was, but as it would be, cracked, crumbling, wreathed in flame. Beyond it lay a darkness deeper than night, filled with shapes that moved without sound. A voice whispered to him, faint as the falling snow. The song begins again. Jon gasped and drew back. The flames died instantly. Benjen still slept beside him, unaware. Yet the air was heavy with heat, as though the fire had not ended but sunk into the earth. When dawn came, Jon found the white feather he had once kept from the raven lying beside him again, though he had lost it years ago. It gleamed faintly in the morning light. Castle Black loomed like a fortress of ice at the world's end. Its towers rose bleak and sharp, and the wall beyond stretched to heaven, an unbroken sheet of frozen light. Jon felt something stir within him when he first looked upon it. Not fear, but recognition. "The wall keeps the living from the dead," Benjen said beside him, "but it also keeps what sleeps beyond from waking." Jon's hand tightened upon his reins. "What sleeps beyond?" "Old things," Benjen said, his voice low. "Things that have waited since before men built castles." As they passed beneath the wall's shadow, Jon shivered. The cold there was unlike any other. It was not the absence of warmth, but the presence of something vast and patient. The days that followed were full of training and duty. He learned the ways of the night's watch, the cold discipline of steel and silence. Yet the dreams came stronger now, burning through his sleep. In one, he walked through a field of snow where a tower stood alone. From its top, fire poured like blood, and a voice called his name, not Jon, but another, older name he did not yet know. In another, he saw a sword of pale light thrust into the heart of darkness. A man's hand held it, and though he could not see the man's face, he felt the same sorrow that had haunted his visions since childhood. One night, he climbed the wall alone. The wind howled like wolves, and the ice groaned beneath his boots. At the summit, he looked northward, and there, far beyond the forests, he saw a faint red glow upon the horizon, a fire burning in the land of endless frost. In the south, far from the wall's cold reach, storms gathered over Dragonstone. Daenerys Targaryen walked the halls of the ancient fortress, her silver hair catching the light of the sea. She did not know why the air felt heavy that night, or why her dreams were full of shadowed wings and songs she could not remember. Her brother ranted of crowns and conquest, of dragons' birthrights and stolen thrones, but Daenerys heard only the sea and the faint echo of music, strings plucked by unseen hands. When she stood upon the balcony, a strange wind rose from the east. It carried the scent of smoke and snow. For a moment, she thought she heard a man's voice whisper her name, tender and mournful. "Blood of my blood." She turned, but no one stood there. Far away, beneath the mountains of Dorne, Arthur Dayne lay dying. Years had passed since he'd seen another soul, and his hair had turned the color of snow. He dreamed often of Rhaegar now, of fire and prophecy, and sometimes he thought he saw the prince's face in the flames of his meager hearth. On his final night, the fire burned brighter than it ever had. He reached toward it, and a familiar voice spoke through the heat. "The time is coming. The blood is waking." Arthur smiled faintly. "Then my watch is ended." He closed his eyes, and the sword dawn slipped from his hand. The fire did not fade when his heart stopped. It flared, white and gold, and for an instant, the lonely cave was bright as sunrise. When the light dimmed, only ashes remained, and a faint trail of smoke rising east, as though carried toward the sea. In the far north, Jon Snow awoke with a start. His room was cold, yet his skin burned. The white feather lay beside him, glowing faintly. He rose and went to the window, where the sky above the wall shimmered like living flame. He did not know why he whispered the words aloud, only that they felt true. The dragon remembers. And beyond the wall, far in the frozen waste, the red glow upon the horizon flickered once more, brighter now, pulsing like the beat of a heart. The cold had teeth that winter. It bit through fur and steel alike, creeping into bone until every breath felt stolen. The men of the Night's Watch cursed the endless snow and the silence that seemed to swallow sound itself. Yet Jon Snow found no peace even in the stillness. For many nights he had dreamed of fire, not the gentle warmth of hearths, but the fierce blaze of dragons that devoured the sky. He woke from such a dream again one dawn, sweat freezing on his brow despite the chill. In the dream, he had walked through a field of frost where flames bloomed like flowers, and from within them, a man called his name, not Jon, but something else, something strange and familiar. He could not remember it upon waking, only the echo of sorrow and the taste of ash on his tongue. Outside, the wall groaned beneath the weight of snow. The dawn was gray and empty. He dressed in silence and went out to the yard, where the other brothers drilled with swords dull from frost. They mocked him still, the Lord's bastard with his haunted eyes and quiet tongue, but their words no longer touched him. There was something stirring inside him now, something vast and restless, like a storm beneath his ribs. Later that day, when the sun was little more than a pale wound behind the clouds, the ravens came. They flew from the east, hundreds of them, black wings cutting through the snow like knives. They settled upon the wall, their voices a harsh chorus. Jon watched them, uneasy. None of them bore messages. None would be caught. They only stared, eyes glinting gold. That night, he could not sleep. He sat alone in the rookery, the air thick with feathers and the rustle of wings. One raven, larger than the rest, hopped closer. Its eyes were not black like the others, but molten gold. It looked at him and spoke, its voice cracked and strange. "Fire awakens." Jon froze. "What are you?" The raven spread its wings, scattering snow. "Blood remembers," it croaked, and then it burst into flame. Jon stumbled back, shielding his face. But the fire did not burn him. It spiraled upward, white and gold, and for a heartbeat he saw a shape within it. A man with silver hair, his face proud and sorrowful. The figure reached toward him. "My son," the voice said, both near and far. "The cold rises. The fire must meet it." Jon tried to speak, but his throat locked. The vision shattered, the light vanished, and the raven lay dead upon the floor, its feathers unburnt, its body cold. The next morning, the Maester found Jon standing upon the wall, staring north. His skin was pale, his eyes shadowed, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "There is something out there," he said, "something moving through the snow." The Maester squinted into the white waste. "The cold plays tricks, my lord. Even the hardiest eyes see phantoms when the wind sings." Jon shook his head. "It's no phantom." He turned away, and the Maester swore the air shimmered faintly where he'd stood, though the boy's breath made no mist. 2 nights later, the watch's hounds began to howl. Fires sputtered and died without cause. Men whispered of shadows that moved against the wind. Then, at the edge of the forest beyond the wall, a red light appeared. Jon led the party that went to investigate. 5 riders, cloaked in black, their torches dim against the endless snow. The closer they rode, the warmer the air grew. When they reached the clearing, they saw it. A single stone, half buried in frost, glowing faintly from within. Runes of fire danced across its surface, though no one recognized the language. One of the men, a ranger named Dywin, stepped forward and touched it. The stone cracked. A hiss filled the air, and smoke poured out. "Back!" Jon shouted, but too late. The stone split apart, revealing within it a small, glimmering scale, white as milk, pulsing like a heart. The air shimmered. A gust of hot wind tore through the clearing, scattering snow like ashes. Then all was still. Jon knelt beside the broken stone, staring at the scale. "What is it?" one of the men whispered. He reached out, but Jon stopped him. "No," he said softly. "It's not meant for you." The scale was warm beneath his fingers. He lifted it carefully, and for an instant his vision blurred. He saw fire beneath ice, dragons flying through storms, and a wall of shadow taller than mountains. When he blinked, the vision was gone, and the stone had crumbled to dust. But the warmth in his hand remained. Back at Castle Black, Jon hid the scale beneath his furs, though it seemed to burn through the fabric. That night, he dreamt again. This time he stood before a wall of black glass, its surface alive with flickering light. From its depths, a voice called, "The dawn will rise again, through you." He woke to find his room lit by strange light. The scale lay upon the table, glowing softly. Its warmth spread through the room, and for the first time in months, Jon did not feel cold. He reached for it and heard the faint sound of wings above the wall. When he stepped outside, the sky was full of ravens. Thousands of them, circling in silence, their wings catching the faint gleam of the moon. He felt the pull then, deep in his chest, the same pull that had haunted him since childhood. He whispered to the sky, "What do you want of me?" And from the black storm of wings came a whisper in answer, "To remember." Far to the south, Daenerys Targaryen stood upon the deck of a ship, staring east. The sea was calm, but her heart was restless. Ever since the birth of her dragons, her dreams had changed. She saw visions of the north, a boy standing upon a wall of ice holding a shard of light, Sometimes she heard him speak her name, though she did not know him. "Khaleesi?" Ser Jorah's voice broke her reverie. "You should rest." "I dreamed again," she said softly, "of snow and fire." He frowned. "Dreams are wind, my queen. The waking world is yours to conquer." But she only turned her eyes back to the sea. The horizon shimmered with light, faint and gold. Somewhere far away, she knew, another fire burned, a fire like hers. North of the wall, Jon stood alone where the forests thinned. The snow beneath his boots steamed faintly. In his hand, the scale gleamed like a captured star. He lifted it to the dark sky and whispered, "If you can hear me, tell me who I am." For a long time, nothing answered. Then, from the heart of the night, came a whisper, like the sound of flame catching tinder. "You are the song," it said, "the bridge between fire and shadow." The wind rose, howling around him. Far beyond, in the frozen distance, a red glow flared once more, larger, closer, pulsing like a heartbeat. Jon closed his fist around the light and turned toward the darkness beyond the wall. And though he did not know it yet, the song that had begun with Rhaegar Targaryen was stirring anew. The song of ice and fire, born of blood and flame, waking at last to meet the long night. The wind beyond the wall was a living thing. It moaned through the black trees, tugging at cloaks, whispering of old sorrows and older hungers. Snow fell in endless sheets, soft as ash, muffling all sound save the heartbeat of the storm. The men of the night's watch huddled around their fires, fearing what stirred beyond the line of light. But Jon Snow did not fear the darkness anymore. For nights uncounted, he had dreamt of flame, and now he carried it within him. The white scale, warm as a living heart, never left his hand. It did not burn nor cool, but seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his blood. Sometimes, when he slept, it glowed faintly through his skin, painting his chamber in ghostly gold. He no longer told anyone of his dreams. There was no need. The fire spoke to him now, clearer than words. He had begun to understand its language, the way it hummed through the air, the way it breathed within his veins. It did not command, it remembered. Yet the cold was remembering too. One morning, as the dawn bled thinly across the ice, a horn sounded from the watchtower. The men stirred, groaning, expecting wildlings. But when Jon climbed the steps to look, what he saw froze the breath in his chest. A storm was moving across the forest, vast and slow, its center darker than night. Trees fell before it, their trunks shattering like glass. And at its heart, he thought he saw shapes. Tall, thin, and glimmering blue. The others were coming. Jon descended the tower. "Rouse the men," he said to the nearest watchman. "Bar the gates. Light every fire you can find." The man hesitated. "A storm, my lord?" "A storm that walks," Jon said. They worked quickly, though fear made their hands shake. Fires blazed along the wall, their smoke curling into the gray sky, yet the heat did little to drive the cold away. Jon stood before the gate, watching as the snow beyond began to twist, rising into the shape of figures. He drew his sword. The blade gleamed pale in the light, as though it too remembered something ancient. "So it begins," he murmured. A gust of wind swept through the courtyard, carrying a voice like the crackle of frost. "Fire child." Jon turned. The others stood beyond the gate, their armor whispering with ice. Their eyes burned blue, colder than the heart of winter. One stepped forward, its face neither man nor ghost. "You are not of them," it said. "You burn too brightly." Jon's breath steamed. "And you are the cold that kills. Why come now? The long sleep ends. the creature replied. The world forgets, but we do not. The dawn must be undone. Jon's hand tightened on his sword. Then you will have to pass through fire. The creature smiled, and the snow began to fall harder. Fire dies, it said. But Jon raised his sword, and as he did, the air shimmered. The white scale at his throat flared bright as the sun. A ring of heat burst outward, melting snow to steam. For a heartbeat, the darkness retreated. The creature hissed and vanished into mist. The others followed, dissolving into the storm. When it was done, Jon fell to his knees, trembling. His breath came shallow, his heart hammering like a drum. Around him, the snow hissed where it touched the ground, turning to water. Sam Tarly found him there not long after, his eyes wide with fear. "Jon," he stammered. "The fire. How did you—" Jon looked at his hands. The skin was unburnt, but his veins glowed faintly beneath the surface, like molten lines through marble. "I don't know," he said softly. "It wasn't me. It was older." Sam swallowed. "The men saw it. They think you're blessed. Or cursed," Jon muttered. That night, no man slept. The wind howled like a wounded beast, and far to the north, faint lights danced upon the horizon, red, gold, and blue, twisting like serpents. In the days that followed, ravens arrived from the south. War had broken once more. Dragons had risen in the east, and the realm trembled beneath their wings. Jon read the letters by firelight, the words blurring as though written by memory. Daenerys Stormborn sails for Westeros. He felt a tremor run through the flame, as though the name itself stirred the fire. That night, he dreamt again. He was standing upon a plain of ash and snow. Before him stood a woman with silver hair, her eyes bright as polished amethyst. Behind her, dragons circled the sky, their wings darkening the sun. "Who are you?" she asked, though her voice was a whisper of wind. "I don't know," he said. "But I think we are the same." She reached toward him, her hand wreathed in flame. "Then wake, brother. The world is dying." He woke with a cry, the fire in his hearth roaring high, as if called by her voice. Days turned to weeks. The storms grew worse. Each night the fire burned lower, and each morning the cold pressed closer. The old men spoke of omens, the end of seasons, the breaking of time. Jon said nothing. He could feel the two forces gathering within him, fire and frost, both waiting to claim him. One night he climbed the wall again, alone. The sky above was black and endless. To the north, the aurora blazed, bands of color twisting like living flame. To the south, the stars flickered faintly, as though dimmed by distance. The wind whispered, "Blood remembers." He closed his eyes, and the warmth surged through him once more. Beneath his skin, the fire moved like a living thing. He saw flashes, his father's face, though not Ned's, a man of silver hair and sorrowful eyes. He saw Lyanna, pale and beautiful, her hands clutching a babe swaddled in blood. The truth fell upon him like a hammer. "I am not a snow," he breathed. "I am the dragon's son." The wind answered, soft as breath, and the wolf's. Tears froze on his cheeks. He looked north once more, where the red glow pulsed faintly in the distance. "Then I will meet my kin in fire or in shadow," he said, "for the dawn must come again." He turned from the wall, the flames in his heart burning steady and fierce. Far away, across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen woke screaming from a dream of snow. In her mind she saw a wall of ice shatter beneath a great red light, and a man with her brother's eyes standing where dragons once fell. She rose and went to the balcony. The sea was calm, but the air trembled, warm and cold all at once. One of her dragons lifted its head, rumbling low, its gaze fixed westward. "What is it?" she whispered. The beast's breath smoked in the air. It turned its eyes to her, and for the first time, Daenerys thought she saw fear there. The long night was coming. In the north, the snow began to glow faintly with buried fire, and in the south, the seas whispered of dragons. Between them, bound by blood and prophecy, two children of flame waited for the world to remember its song, one born of fire, one tempered by ice, and in the dark between their destinies, the dead stirred, listening. The wall stood in silence as dawn crept over the world, its vast face catching the pale light like a mirror of ice. From its frozen crown, Jon Snow watched the horizon, where the darkness gathered like an army. The air was colder than death, the wind cut like glass, yet beneath his skin, fire moved, a restless warmth that refused to die. It had grown stronger with each passing day, until now it hummed through his very bones. The north beyond the wall was alive. He could feel it. The cold was no longer empty, but filled with intent, a vast will pressing southward, patient and cruel. Somewhere in that white waste, the others marched. The dead were coming, and the living world would soon be tested. Behind him, the men of the Night's Watch waited, black cloaks snapping in the wind. Sam stood nearest, pale and trembling, clutching a raven on his arm. "Jon," he said, his breath clouding. "This came from the Citadel." Jon took the scroll and broke the seal. The parchment crackled in the cold. "Daenerys Stormborn has crossed the narrow sea. She brings dragons." The letters blurred before his eyes, yet the fire within him leapt as if answering the words. Dragons, 3 of them, alive, their wings blackening the skies of the south. He could almost hear them, feel the beat of their wings in his chest. He handed the letter back to Sam. "So it begins," he murmured. Sam looked uncertain. "Do you think she'll come north?" Jon's eyes were distant, fixed upon the storm that gathered at the edge of the world. "If the fire remembers its own," he said, "she must." That night he could not sleep. He walked the wall alone beneath the stars, the white scale warm against his heart. When he closed his eyes, he heard music, the low, mournful song of wind through ice and the faint echo of harp strings, notes of sorrow woven with hope. And then faintly, a voice. "The dragon has 3 heads." He turned, expecting to see some shadow standing beside him, but there was only snow. Far away, Daenerys Targaryen dreamed of a man with a wolf's eyes standing amid fire. His face was unfamiliar, yet she knew his blood as her own. When she woke, her dragons were restless, wings stirring the dust of the Great Pyramid. Their cries echoed through the night like bells of warning. She stood upon her balcony, her silver hair whipping in the wind. "The north," she whispered. "It calls." The dragons turned their eyes toward her, and one, the black one, Drogon, snarled softly. The air shimmered with heat, though she felt the faintest breath of cold beneath it, 2 fires pulling toward each other through the long dark. In the following weeks, winter tightened its grip. The storms grew so fierce that the wall itself seemed to moan under their weight. Jon's men grew anxious, and even the bravest whispered of omens. Fires burned lower each night, food grew thin. Yet Jon's resolve hardened. He stood before the old gods in the weirwood grove, the red eyes staring down through crusted ice. "The time has come," he said to the silent tree. "The fire must stand against the night." He unsheathed his sword and drove it into the frozen earth. Steam rose where the blade struck, melting snow to reveal the roots beneath. The warmth from his blood seeped into the ground, and the tree's eyes seemed to flicker with red light. Remember. The word did not come from the wind this time, but from the earth itself, deep and solemn. Jon lifted his head. The air around him shimmered, and for a moment he saw them, shadows moving between the trees, pale faces crowned with ice, their eyes burning blue. The others watched, waiting. He could feel their cold, a presence vast and eternal. "I will not yield," he said. The nearest shade tilted its head, its voice a whisper of frost. "You cannot fight what was before the fire. You are but its echo." Jon's hand closed around the hilt of his sword. "Then I am the echo that will end you." He pulled the blade free, and as he did, the flame within him erupted. His sword burned white, not like steel heated in a forge, but like light itself made solid. The shadows flinched and vanished into the night. When the light faded, Jon fell to his knees, breathless. His sword's edge was blackened, its hilt warm. Behind him, the weirwood grove steamed faintly in the cold, its roots smoking as if it too had felt the fire. In the south, Daenerys marched north with her host. Dragons filled the skies above her fleet, their cries shattering the clouds. Her army was vast, unsullied, Dothraki, freedmen from cities of dust and gold. Yet even among them, she felt alone, as if something unseen walked beside her. At night, she dreamed of snow and a wall of ice that rose like a mountain. In the dreams, a man waited atop it, holding a sword of light. When she tried to call his name, the wind carried it away. "Jon," she whispered in her sleep, though she did not know why. By the time her ships reached White Harbor, the sea had frozen at the edges. The north had become a land of ghosts. She sent ravens ahead, but no answer came. Only silence. Then one morning, as her dragon circled above the white fields, she saw him. He stood upon a rise of snow, cloaked in black, his hair dark as shadow. Behind him stretched the frozen wastes. Before him burned a single fire, small yet defiant. Their eyes met across the distance, and she felt the pull as if the world itself had turned toward him. "You came," he said when they met, his breath fogging the air. "I dreamed of you," she answered, "of fire meeting ice." He nodded. Then the dream was prophecy. The wind rose, carrying the sound of distant horns. The others had come at last, their army a tide of frost and silence stretching beyond sight. Daenerys turned to her dragons. "We end this tonight," she said. Jon drew his sword, its edge faintly glowing with buried fire. Together. The night that followed was a storm of fire and snow. Dragons screamed across the sky, their flame cutting swaths of light through the endless dark. Jon fought beside Daenerys at the heart of the storm, the cold burning his flesh, the heat searing his soul. He struck down the first of the White Walkers, his blade blazing like dawn. Daenerys' dragons roared above, raining fire upon the dead. Yet still they came, endless, relentless. In the midst of battle, Jon felt the white scale at his throat break apart, its light pouring into him. The world vanished in brightness. He heard Rhaegar's voice, calm and distant. "The fire is not yours alone. You are the bridge, Jon. You are the song." When the light faded, the storm was gone. The snow had melted to water, and the dead lay still. Daenerys stood beside him, her eyes wide. "What did you do?" Jon looked at his hands. The fire was gone from them now, leaving only smoke. "What was meant to be," he said. Above them, dawn broke, red and gold across the horizon. The long night had ended, but as the sun rose, far to the north where ice met sea, the snow shifted once more. A pale hand broke through the frost. and a single blue eye opened. The song of ice and fire was not yet done.